Yes, it is the Blue Room, fresh from another home defeat. Just when you thought Everton had turned a corner, everything was going to be fine. They give you a big slap in the face at Goodison Park, don't they? Joining me this week to make you feel better about everything are Paddy Boyland from The Athletic. Paddy, how are you? You're laughing. You're laughing already. That bodes well.
I don't know if we're going to make everyone feel better about everything, but we can give it a try.
And also joining us is Mick Green. Or Mick, how are you?
Yeah, actually, much better since you asked the question a couple of like hours ago. So it might have been less than that.
Yeah, yeah.
But
You're
yeah, I'm
giving me
sure we'll get
credit
on to that
there.
in a bit.
You're giving
Yeah,
me
same
credit
as
there
us.
for being prepared when I'm not usually that prepared. I just thought of it as I was setting up the Zoom call. We will get on to that shortly. Just before we get on, actually, I never say this, and I should, but if you're listening to this on an iTunes app or anything, please do subscribe. Do give us a rating. Say nice things about me. Say terrible things about Paddy in the comments. Same on YouTube as well. Subscribe. It all helps with the algorithm and stuff like that. I know loads of you listen to us, but it'd be great to get more people listening to us as well. So, and if you do it, I won't say it at the start of the show ever again because it makes me feel awkward as a host. We'll just move on. We'll move on swiftly. We will talk about Luton, obviously. We'll also talk about Bournemouth on Saturday and how big a game that is. But just sort of wanted to get off on a light-hearted start because I know it was pretty depressing on Saturday. We've had some fun and games over the last few days, haven't we, with the Reds and VAR and all that kind of stuff. And it was ramped up a notch today by Jurgen Klopp in his press conference, who said that he thinks that the football match should be replayed from Saturday after that decision went against Liverpool. I'm just going to just leave that one there to hang for a little bit. But to make it Everton related, I thought I would ask some of our listeners and I'd ask you guys if you could pick one Everton game from the past to be replayed for any reason you can think of, any reason you like, what would it be? I know Mick is much more prepared than Paddy for this, so I'll go to you first, Mick. What is your choice?
Yeah, so there's like three, but two of them are just less. I think more widespread, I suppose, in terms of the answers that I've seen in the Twitter replies. For me, I think Fiorentina at home would be. I think just to repeat any game, I think that would be. It's just one of them where you look at it, even if they just played the exact same like performance, you win that game, don't you? And then who knows what would have happened. And then I think another one I saw quite a few times was the Palace at home under Martinez in his first season. However, I've got one that I think might top it all that I don't think I've seen anyone else mention. It's a bit left field, but I think in terms of the knock on effects to where we are today, I think it's quite big. I was having a look at the table around the fixture and I didn't realise it was that tight at the time. So I've gone with, and this kind of coincides with terrible VAR decisions as well, which the others don't. And that is the draw. I think it was a draw in the end against Manchester United, under Carlo Ancelotti when Calvert-Lewin scores. I think that would have been a winner, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it was 92nd minute, yeah.
Yeah, and Sigurdsson was sat on the floor, and I think wrongly it was given disallowed because he was offside or blocking the view of the goalkeeper. I think Everton, and I think this anyway because I think COVID came at the wrong time for us all, but for Everton, I think it came at the wrong time. So I think that was some of the best performing Everton sides that I think probably for sure under the Mashiri era, probably only rivaled by Ronald Koeman's Everton in the second half of his first season. But I didn't realise at the table at the time before that weekend, if Everton had won, they would have gone and just getting the table back up. If Everton, they were 11th at the time, which I think is probably why it doesn't kind of like clock that much. But if Everton had won, they would have gone on to 39 points and would have gone 8th, but would have been 2 points off 5th.
Wow, so proper sliding doors moment.
Yeah.
I remember at the time being just really annoyed that Sigurdsson had missed the initial chance because it was an absolute sitter,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
yeah, it was.
And
But
I
I
think
think just
he was also fouled, wasn't he? Straight after, like Wan-Bissaka comes across
that's
and
why he was
cleans him
sat on
out.
the floor, wasn't he?
Yeah.
But yeah, they would have been 2 points off 5th, a point off 6th. I think before that game, I think between then and Ancelotti's first match, the only teams who had won more points had been Man City and Liverpool. So we were with the momentum was with us, and I think if we won that, I mean, I know the week later we got battered by Chelsea, but It's obviously a different story at Stamford Bridge, I suppose. But I think that the momentum could have been with us then because who knows, if we'd gone on to actually qualify for Europe last season, I suppose that, the people at the football club could have gone and said, well, all that money that we've spent in the past is kind of, it's been, it's worth it. We've got European football again. Ancelotti's definitely going to stay now. We're going to be able to invest even more money into the football club. Who knows what the knock-on effects would have happened. I know it's a bit of a long shot to say Everton would have definitely qualified for Europe because I think they were pretty dreadful in those 9 games in Project Restart. But before that, they were actually quite good. So that's what I'm going with.
Yeah, I thought this would make us be like a nice light-hearted start to the show and we'd have a few laughs. I'm just depressed again, just thinking about that. But yeah, bizarrely, I saw the video of that goal today. And I think at the time we had the team's just so mad when you look back at it, even though it's like 2 years ago. It's like we had Calvert-Lewin, Richarlison, Moise Keane, Sigurdsson, Sidibe was on there as well in the box for some reason. I think Bernard played the pass in to set the goal up. Like, just changed so much in the course of such a short space of time. But Paddy's, has Mick triggered any memories for you there?
I think my memory actually, and it's not a positive one, but just before football, and I suppose the rest of society got locked down for good, I remember going away to cover Everton at Chelsea, Stamford Bridge, and I think it was a midfield two of Andre Gomez and I think Tom Davis. And Everton lost 4-0. So, I mean, I was ready after that not to watch football for a long, long time because they just got absolutely outplayed. And I remember just thinking, like, why are Everton playing a midfield two against these? They're just getting completely bypassed at every opportunity. Billy Gilmore played for Chelsea and did very well. I think it was kind of one of his several good performances for Chelsea.
I think that was Anthony Gordon's Premier League debut, that game as well.
Could have been. They were playing in that, don't even know how to describe it, like orangey salmon kit.
Yeah.
And it was definitely, I just remember Gomez in particular looking completely lost out there in the midfield too, and everybody kind of wising up to the fact that he couldn't play in that role properly in the Premier League. Unlike Mick, I do think that Ancelotti would have gone regardless kind of whether Everton qualified for Europe or not. And I think it's purely because if you asked him what's his club, predominantly he'd say Real Madrid. Even though he's Italian, I think he'd say Real Madrid. I think they just, whenever they came calling, it was almost as though he felt like he had unfinished business because of the last time. Whenever they come calling, he's going to go. And I think he loved the lifestyle in Madrid as well. So not entirely sure on that one. I mean, the really obvious shout is Villarreal. And I suppose if you've got grounds for a game to be replayed, if you're going to go down the kind of the Klopp histrionic route, then you probably go for the Villarreal match because there's no way on earth that goal should have been disallowed. I saw you saying on Twitter, Matt, that you could play it again and Everton would have lost. And you're almost certainly right. Kind of a very tough team to draw in. I think Everton were actually, when Everton seeded and they weren't.
Yeah.
They somehow managed to draw the semi-finalists in the qualifying round, an unseeded team in the qualifying round, that year's semi-finalists with some fantastic players when you go through with Forlan and Riquelme, and I think Soreen was playing a fullback and doing very well. So there's a good chance Everton would have lost that game anyway, but obviously we don't know. It was a gross injustice. So that's a reason for it to be replayed. And had Everton qualified for the Champions League proper that season, then I think the whole face of the modern history would look very different. So it's obvious, but I think it's probably the best answer.
Yeah, I'd go Palace, the 3-2 Palace that Mick mentioned there earlier. In a sense that, like, I reckon if we try, I'm assuming that like when we replay this game, we go back to that time and we've got those players. And I think that night Martinez played Barkley instead of McCarthy, didn't he? I think he's trying to be a bit too cocky, and we just got picked off on the counter attack all night through the middle by Zaha. And we went 3-1 down. And
what was the game that did get called off?
So that it got called off in January because of the wind, isn't it? The very, very wind night.
You see, my problem with that is that I think they named a team for that game and it was horrific.
It was awful, yeah. It was really bad. I think it was like Oviedo right wing or something like that.
Yeah, McGeady was in there as well, wasn't he?
And I remember the time everyone was like, God, thank God that got called off. But it's just mad, that Palace game. It's like, because we were playing so well, and everything was working so well, and then he just decided to make that change. But I think Palace were in quite. I think Pulis was their manager then, wasn't he? I think he'd come in and like sort of galvanise them a bit. And just if you could go back to that night and just play McCarthy and Barry, who were like the mainstay of that season and us doing so well. Like you look at that and like if we won that game, we would have got 75 points that season. Like you can imagine an Everton team getting anywhere
But
near
that still wouldn't have been enough, would it? I mean, I know we could say that maybe the circumstances afterwards would have been different. Everton might have gotten a roll and
because Arsenal won every game, didn't they?
Differently.
Yeah.
But my sense was that Arsenal were always, looking back at it now in hindsight, Arsenal were always likely to chase Everton down. They were the experienced ones in that kind of situation. And even though Everton had a very good team and probably did deserve a Champions League place that year, they were just that little bit better. It's tough, isn't it?
Was it Southampton we dropped points against after that as well?
Yeah,
we scored our 3 own goals or something.
Yeah, we had Stones and Alcaraz as centre back there, and Coleman and I think Stones scored own goals. Yeah, in the first half. Right, I remember I was in the away end, it was right in front of us, and it was. I mean, that was the day when it really went, didn't it? And then we had the home game against City where everyone was like, "Do we want us to win or not?" Because Liverpool were going for the title, and it was just all got a bit messy from that point on. But I can't remember that. But I remember that Palace game. It was like if we'd won then, we would have took like a huge. I think it would have been like 4 points ahead of Arsenal or something like that, and it would like you wonder how that would have impacted them then as well. So yeah, bit of a sliding doors moment. We did ask for some people to give their answers on Twitter to this. Les Roberts says the Palace game replay until we win. The United game before lockdown as well because the winner was not offside. Danny Malaya dug this one out. I honestly couldn't remember this until he found the screenshot. It was Arsenal at home when Drenfer scored and was 5 yards onside. This was in 2012. We lost 1-0 and Vermaelen scored for them. The screenshot is on Twitter for anyone to see it. It is bad. Maggie said FA Cup final 2009, get Lampard sent off for diving. Matt Flusk, Wigan in the Cup at the tail end of Martinez. Martinez then doesn't go on to get the job, and Vitor Pereira is currently driving us to our 6th title in 10 years. Paddy's not having that one. Mike Sullivan, just because I'm still absolutely seething over at the Clattenburg derby. Connor Bennett has said Rodwell derby shouldn't have been sent off. Chelsea away 3-3 when John Terry was offside. And the United semi in 2016 purely because we had Mo Betic at fullback.
Everton still should have won that game.
Yeah, it was.
Still had the chances.
Second half,
Still had the chances. Lukaku had the penalty save.
Was amazing that day. It was like, oh god.
Considering how many players they were missing and kind of how many square pegs and round holes they had, they played very well, but missed a lot of chances and got done at the other end, didn't they? I think it was Martial. So
just a few. Go on, Mick.
You could replay an awful lot of Merseyside derbies. That's the thing that comes to mind. I mean, I've just off the top of my head, I've got 07, 08. So that's the one where Clattenburg does everything wrong, and by his own admission was overawed by the occasion. The 11-12 derby with the Rodwell sending off, that was just ridiculous as well. You could go through many since then, I suppose. Which is why this idea that every time a decision goes against you, the game should be replayed. It's just ridiculous because you'd be playing games left, right, and centre. Wolves would have to have half of the games replayed from the last 12 months. I wonder whether there's going to be time for all of this.
And just a couple more. We've had Steve Corley said, I was going to say the 77 FA Cup semi-final, but that was replayed and we still got battered. So, there's no guarantee when it comes to Everton. Mike Kirby says Fiorentina, the away leg should have took a 1-0 loss back to Goodison instead of trying to get the away goal. And LGK said the Clattenburg derby, glass houses, etc., etc. So there's loads. There's absolutely loads. Oh, and one last one from Jack. The first leg of the League Cup semi-final under Moyes, Sean Wright-Phillips header.
I mean, you could do the other one is Raheem Sterling carrying the ball about 3 yards off the pitch in a game that Everton were in a tie. Everton were leading comfortably. I don't think City get back into that game.
Yeah, it's felt good, this, hasn't it? Just getting all these off our chest after all these years.
I'm not sure if it's cathartic or just making me even more depressed, Matt. But I'm sure we'll know soon.
There we go. If you're watching us on YouTube, if you want to get anything off your chest about Everton's past, just leave a comment. Just leave a comment. There's nothing better than to click a read more on a comment because it's so long and people are just getting so much off the chest. So do that. But yeah, let's talk about Saturday. I excluded Saturday, by the way, on Twitter from the games you would want to see replayed because, you know, it's just too soon to address it even then. But we're here now. We've got to talk about it. Mick, I will come to you first, mate. I mean, were you suckered in by them? Did Brentford and Aston Villa make you think this is going to change now? We're going to win 3 games in a week and we're going to bounce into that international break and into Anfield and everything's going to be all right as it can be at the moment, given what's going on at the club?
Well, yeah, because for me, it was a week of curses broken. Initially, we finally got our first win of the season in the league against Brentford. And then we and I, for the first time, went to Villa and actually saw us win. And I was in the home end for that. And I just remember watching this. I was like, this team is just completely different. I know we've played relatively okay, I think, compared to the points that we've actually got. But I thought that the performance on the Wednesday, a week today, against Villa was just so good. Probably not as good as against the one against Brentford, but I thought just to go there, and I think the reaction compared to when we were there in August, it was chalk and cheese, I suppose. So I thought going to Luton, and I think a lot of the fan base thought that. I think there was kind of a whole, I suppose, a generalisation to think that a lot of people were actually optimistic going to Goodison for the first time in a long time. It almost felt like the first game in a while where there wasn't a significant amount of pressure because we just won back-to-back games, and obviously we still are lacking that first win at home. But I think compared to the first couple of games, where especially there's always pressure on the opening day, especially when you're playing a team like Fulham to get that first win, and there was always the semantics around not having a striker or having a striker. I remember looking before the game on the weekend, that the last home game before Arsenal, our front three was James Garner, Lewis Dobbin, and Danjuma, which already feels a lifetime ago. I suppose it's not ridiculous to think. It's not ridiculous to suppose it's not a shock. I suppose why we're still winless at home when that was more or less our strongest team for the first 2 home games. But yeah, so I kind of expected us, and to be fair to them, I expected a bit of fluidity in the performance in the first half. I thought they'd come out the blocks and dominate and play with, I suppose, a sense of relaxation that the fans had at Goodison for the first time in a while. And I think, to be honest, for the first 15-20 minutes, they were more than fine. They had, I know they didn't have any real clear-cut opportunities, but I think in terms of there wasn't more I could ask really from them. They were dominant. They were in control. They were quite frequently entering key attacking areas, and I thought the actual game plan was paying off. Even with Garner on the right, I know that was probably a talking point beforehand, and who should have played there, and obviously was a talking point afterwards. But even then, I thought that was completely fine. We played quite narrow, and it seemed to be working, and it just seemed to, as soon as Luton seemed to get 1-2 corners in a row, didn't they? And it was almost like, well, was that 15-20 minutes? Was that it? Because I think it's growing. Everyone's quite conscious of the fact that this team needs to score first to seem to win a game of football, and I think that obviously means having to score first in the first half. So if you miss out on your opportunities early on and then allow the opposition to gain a little bit of momentum themselves, I think we've seen that in all 3 of the other home games. Arsenal aside, where we've had the control for the majority of the game, and the opposition, you can kind of almost visually see them realise that there's something in this for them if they put the foot on it. And I thought Luton did that at times. Obviously, they had set pieces to do that. It's not like the cards open or anything, but I think for the teams who have been as good at defending set pieces that we have really since Dyche came in, it's so frustrating to concede 2 pathetic goals of that nature. So you can't have any complaints. Well, we can't have any complaints, but from Dyche's side, that's his bread and butter. That's been this team's bread and butter. They went to probably the best set piece team in the league in Brentford the week beforehand and coped with it relatively fine, apart from one moment after we scored the the second goal, I think it was. So, you know, they're quite clearly capable. So to concede 2 goals of that nature. But yeah, I think really it's so hard to not look at it as just a massive missed opportunity, because I think the whole semantics around the football club would be massively different if they managed to win 3 games in a row. I know one of them was in the cup, but the fact that it was against Aston Villa, against a team that we'd already been battered by, and still played a relatively strong side, especially in the second half, and played so well. Just so frustrating, and I think kind of epitomises in many ways Everton under Sean Dyche, where they seem to kind of turn a corner, whether it be with a solid performance and ground out the result away from home, or they've managed to actually win at home, and then they go doing they do something stupid like that.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Paddy, that Mick sort of says there about it was a week where he thought it was going to break a lot of curses, and you know, bringing it round to like sitting there in the first half, we've been done 2 set pieces, and it's annoying, it's terrible defending, but I'm sort of sat there thinking like, you know what, these have got a plan. It can happen. It's almost like made up, but it can happen. You can get done on set pieces, and crucially, I think everybody in that ground between probably minute 35 and half time ago, and we need to get one before half time here. You know, we really need to get one, and then all of a sudden the second half looks different. They'll be a bit more nervous, and we'll come out flying. And we get it eventually after the VAR, and you're thinking, right, here we go. The platform is there now. You know, the crowd they didn't get booed off. The crowd were back on the side against his scored before half time. Luton are probably a bit shaky. One of the centre halves goes off injured at half time as well. Luton, you figure, right, the platform is there now for you to go out and put this to bed, to get that 3rd win in a week, to finally score more than 1 goal in a home game under this manager. You know, you're not going to get a better chance to sort of come back from 2 goals down, to put a lot of this to bed. And that's why, for me, in so many respects, I was so much more disappointed with the second half than the first half, even though it obviously ends up 0-0 and we don't concede any goals in the second half. But it just felt like from the minute they kicked the ball off to start the second half until, listen, I mean, I walked out on 85 because I just couldn't watch it anymore because it was just so excruciating. But from what I saw, it just felt like from the minute they kicked off up until the last kick of football I saw in the ground, they just got worse and worse and worse. And it felt like they got further and further away from scoring a goal.
Yeah, well, you expect after the goal just before half time, you expect Everton to throw everything at Luton in the second half. And I suppose they did to an extent. They made changes. They went 2 up top, like a proper conventional 2 up top, and loaded the penalty area at every opportunity. But it turned out to be a damn squib. It's just, if you look at the chances they created in the second half, I think Beto was offside, quite clearly offside for one header that he put well over the bar. And then there's probably only another header for Beto, which I think he should score from, to be honest. That's probably the only kind of big golden opportunity after the break. Kind of in the match piece of it, I tend to write my match pieces as a reaction, more or less straight on the final whistle. So even if they go live on Monday, I'll write them on Saturday evening. And kind of my thoughts at the time, and that thought has persisted throughout this period, was that Everton pressed the panic button way too quickly. If they carried on doing what they were doing in an attacking sense in the first half, I think they'd have got more opportunities, and they'd have probably ended up getting at least a point in the game. So like you, I was more disappointed in the second half performance, because I think it showed the limitations of Everton to a greater and truer extent than the first half did. I mean, like as Mick said, that they've not always defended set pieces badly. Luton exposed some areas that'll need to be tweaked. But the true nature of Everton is this side that stumbles at home, that can't buy a win at Goodison now, with the worst record in the Premier League of any side in the kind of over the past 13 months or so since the start of last season. And I believe even Leeds have a better home record than Everton, even though they haven't started the season in the Premier League. So that game is almost more difficult for Dyche as a manager and for Everton as a cohort than Brentford or Aston Villa, because you have your game plan in front of you in those away games. You know you're going to have less of the ball. You know you're playing for set pieces. You know that most likely the target is get the ball up quickly to Dom and get runners beyond him. and that's where players like Doucouré and McNeil, etc., will thrive. I think we saw at home against Luton, particularly in that second half, the limitations of Dyche's setup, but also the players as well. And going long into these two big towering centre forwards was so basic, it was unreal. Exactly the kind of attacks Luton would have wanted to defend against, I guess, if you'd asked them before the game. Exactly the kind of attacks they used to playing against. And Everton had the blueprint there for them in an attacking sense from the first half. It would have been nice to see personnel move about. You could have got maybe, I don't know, you could have still brought Harrison on. You could have had Danjuma playing just off Calvert-Lewin or Beto. You might have mixed things up a little bit, got Garner into the centre of midfield. But I think they lost control. Even though they had more of the ball than Luton, the second half was played on Luton's terms, with these kind of balls into the box that weren't ever really going to do too much. And then the other thing was the relentless time wasting. I mean, I asked our data guys for kind of ball in play stats, and I think only 3 games across the whole Premier League have had less actual football action in the match. I was kind of so stop-start, and that's what I mean by Luton playing it on their terms. I don't think Everton asked enough questions. And bizarrely, I'd kind of looked at the bench and thought, well, at the very least here, if Everton are going to go down in games, then if you've got Danjuma, Harrison and Beto, then you've got a chance of mixing it up and getting results. So that was disappointing. It was really quite disappointing and completely deflating after what had been a week of real positivity. Where, like Mick, you saw the performance against Brentford, saw the performance and the result against Aston Villa, and I was wondering if this was going to start to turn for Everton, if Everton were just going to start to kind of climb a little bit. Often that's where Everton bite you in the arse, isn't it? Unfortunately.
Yeah, all too often, unfortunately. And yeah, I think you're right about the personnel. Like, I'm sort of sitting here now and I'm thinking, like, Everton should have finished that game with the 2 fullbacks as Patterson and McNeil. Like, I don't think there's any reason why in the last 10 minutes of that game.
Yeah.
You know, because Patterson comes on. Does he come on about 85? Does he? Maybe a little bit earlier. And Mykolenko stays on the pitch for the entire game. And I think the situation there in the second half, they're attacking the Gladys Street in front of me. And McNeil, I don't know what he was doing or where he was playing. It was absolutely mad. Like, he seems to be playing off the striker, and Doucouré would drift into that position on the left-hand side. So we had no width on the left. And then on the right-hand side, we had Harrison, who obviously is left-footed, and he'd get it and he'd cut inside. And Young, let's have it right, he can't get up. He can't get up the pitch anymore.
Yeah.
He can't get up to support and offer that overlap and run anymore. And even by Patterson just being there and just making that run around him all the time, he would have drew a man away from Harrison, and all of a sudden the pitch opens up for you. So everything was just getting so clogged all over the pitch. And it was like, it just seems so obvious what needed to happen. Like, when we brought on those two centre forwards, and we've got to get crossed into the box. You've got to create space in wide areas on our right, or you've got to have someone who is actually there on the left. And it was just the same thing happening time and time again. And Mick, I wanted to come to you on that, because obviously there's been loads of stuff about XG and all that in the build in the aftermath. I thought it was really interesting that the manager after the game said, well, this isn't verbatim, but we won the XG. And then in quotes that came off from the club yesterday, it said stats mean nothing. So I don't know if someone sort of had a bit of a word for him there and said, this has pissed a few people off. Can you sort this out? But I think when we get to this stage of managers, and it's happened so often down the years, we get into this perpetual cycle of we're doing terribly, and then another person will go, well, the manager can't get on the pitch and stick the ball in the back of the net for them. And we go round and round and round again. What is it you think we're seeing here with this team now, and the pattern that we've been having at home? Because I remember that the first game of the season we spoke after Fulham, and we said, well, if this is a one-off, then it's all right, because more often than not, these things will even themselves out. In a sort of similar way to we had the Lampard last season, where everyone was getting quite excited and you were very hesitant, going, well, the numbers say that this is going to turn at some point, it's going to turn badly. You're in the same situation now where you look at it and go, this is going to turn well for Dyche, sort of the inverse of that? Or is it a bit of a different issue when it's attacking as opposed to defensive?
Yes and no, I suppose, to your answer. I think putting it like a bit of a blank statement, I think Everton are a much better team than a team that has 4 points after 7 games. I think it is, and I think they deserve that. I think maybe there's a misconception, especially with when it comes to expected goals, that just because you create big chances or have good chances to score doesn't necessarily mean that you, one, deserve to win, or two, performed well. I think you can have a flurry of good opportunities and actually played quite poorly. I think that's okay for that to be the case. I think it's interesting. Luton especially was. There was certainly some good parts. I thought, well, I say good parts, but interesting parts to take away from it, because I thought there was quite a noticeable effort made, especially in the first half, and I thought we saw it against Brentford as well, in terms of how Everton actually set up, and it looked like they'd actually tried something different. And you've hinted at it there with McNeil, tried something different to actually break these teams down in open play. I just think it was probably counterproductive, and is counterproductive with the players that we've got available. And I think if we all answered the question of where do we think Everton's creativity lies, it's out wide. And those players are Dwight McNeil and Jack Harrison. So generally you wouldn't want them inside. But I think that, to me especially, it looked like the game plan was to get those players. Harrison less so in the second half, but McNeil particularly. I don't know whether this was kind of part of trying to tackle the fact that James Garner was playing on the right, so having those players further inside was to combat that. But I know Dyche said, I think it was after his post-match press conference against Brentford last week, Paddy will obviously know better than me. I think he actually might have been his interview with the club, that he wants McNeil to be given more of a freer role than he had last season, to be able to, in possession, to be able to, I suppose, be able to drop deep, to be able to drop inside. And I thought we saw that, but that means that left side then has to be dominated, I suppose, by whoever's playing at fullback. And obviously on the weekend, that was Vitaly Mykolenko. And I think you made a really good point there, Matt, that probably the last 10 minutes we should have gone for McNeil. I didn't think he had a particularly good game on Saturday, but we should have gone for McNeil at left back rather than Mykolenko. But I think that kind of hinted the fact that that should have been the case, because the way in which McNeil was playing was he was so central that he wasn't the outball anymore. Like, I remember looking quite a few times last year at the stat progressive passes received. I mean, kind of self-explanatory. It's who's receiving the most progressive passes from the team, who's basically the outball, who's getting played in, into the most creative positions, really. And for the large period, especially when Everton played well, especially when Everton played well at home, it was always McNeil. He was the one who was the highest number. He was seen as Everton's, because there was pretty much no one else really apart from Alex Iwobi. He was the main source of creativity. But on the weekend, it was I think he still might have been joint, but he was joint with Vitaly Mykolenko, and Mykolenko had the most touches in the attacking third as well. And I think that kind of, like, to me, that from what I saw, that was by design, but kind of also sums up the issues that Everton had. That the person who had the most touches in the attacking third is probably centre backs. Despite the centre backs, well, even then maybe you'd say James Tarkowski and Brandtweit are all right on the ball, but you'd probably say Mykolenko is the least creative player in the side, and yet he's the person who's getting the opportunities the most in attacking areas. And I think that was, that was premeditated, and I think it says to me that they're obviously trying something different, and they're trying to find new ways of breaking down teams like this. But whether it actually works or not in the long term, I'm not sure. Getting to your further point, though, I think what's really crucial is the upcoming fixtures. I think after Bournemouth, it's Liverpool, West Ham, Brighton. I think Burnley's in between those two, and then it's Palace and Manchester United. There's only, to me, really Palace, which seems like a similar game to what Luton will be or what Wolves will be. Teams in which Everton will be, they'll be more like Brentford than Luton. And I think that's got to be seen as a positive, because the owners won't be on Everton in those games. There's always a chance that, because the people managing those football clubs are relatively smart, that they'll come and try. And I think what we saw at the end of Lampard's reign in particular, I remember the Wolves game and the Southampton game in particular, where it was almost like the side game in went, we know that you're just not really going to do anything here, so you can have the ball and we'll just eat into all that space behind. So that is a worry. But I think more positively, I don't think Bournemouth manager Iraola's quite a purist, so I don't think he's going to come in and try and implement the same tactics that Luton did, and that should play into our hands. So I think that kind of might help coincide with the fact that if Everton are able to return to the mean, I suppose, and what their performance probably should have deserved over the opening weeks, we might see more points come out of maybe more difficult fixture list coming up. But I don't think it will have been because they've just been unlucky in a couple of weeks. Because I think they have been unlucky, but I think they've also been a little bit poor. But at the same time, I think they've still been much better than what we were seeing last year. The points just don't kind of, it doesn't reflect that.
I suppose that approach towards the end of Lampard's tenure was a bit of rope-a-dope, wasn't it? It was just make sure you give Everton the ball, they'll fizzle out, and then there'll be a chance or two at the other end that you can take. And there was an element of that again on Saturday with Luton, where they played heavily for set pieces, had fantastic delivery and fairness from Doughty, who I thought was probably the man of the match on the day, even though he didn't score himself. And then expose Everton's limitations the other way. But Everton were completely complicit in that. I mean, going back to the first half strategy that Mick's outlined there, I think it was by design that you've got two very narrow wingers coming inside in Garner and McNeil, and then you've got Young and Mykolenko trying to fly past on the overlap and provide the actual width. That's fine if you're Tottenham and you've got Pedro Porro and Udogie, or it's fine if you're kind of at Arsenal and you've got somebody like Zinchenko who can create from those wide areas. Liverpool, if you've got Trent Alexander-Arnold and Robertson. But we have to be very honest about Everton's resources here and what Everton don't have, maybe with the exception of a still raw Nathan Patterson, is kind of creative attacking fullbacks who are able to provide those kind of crosses. Maybe the option in some of those games, as you mentioned, is not only McNeil but James Garner playing in that kind of right back role and almost becoming a bit of an auxiliary quarterback, even though I don't like that term. That might be an option. My issue with the second half strategy was that there didn't even seem to be enough cohesion to get into those areas anymore. Everton stopped doing a lot of those things at all, and in sacrificing a midfielder and going route one, not only did they play into Luton's hands, but they didn't even really have the bodies to sustain the attacks. And I actually thought there was a period in the game where Luton looked more likely to score a third than Everton did to equalise. So there were a couple of different issues within each half, I think, for Dyche to ponder, at least with regards to the attack. Thankfully, there are solutions here. You've got the positional flexibility of Danjuma. Jack Harrison, I think, will end up being hopefully a really important part under Dyche, and I think he's a talented player who can add goals and assists to the squad. Calvert-Lewin has come back and has been great in the main so far, and certainly looks a step above even better. So there are options here, but I still think Dyche is searching for the right configuration of players, what works best, how it all kind of knits together. And I suppose that my slight concern here is that, or maybe it's a big concern, is that with the exception of Pickford in goal, the central defensive two, and maybe Calvert-Lewin up front, you could question kind of first choice starters in each position here. I mean, who's Everton's best right back? If they go with Mykolenko, can they play the way they try?
Coleman, isn't
it? maybe, but then kind of left back, if you go with Mykolenko, you have to understand what he is, and he isn't Leighton Baines or Luca Dean in the attacking third. So you have to play a different way there, and that means you probably need more width on left wing. What configuration do you go for in wide areas? Do you play McNeil and Harrison, which is what I probably think he's likely to do moving forward? Does Doucouré stay in the number 10 position, or do you need something more expansive there for home games? And where does James Garner fit into all of it? So there's kind of 5 or 6 fairly key selection decisions for Dyche here, and it's great to have extra options, but you need to put the right ones on the pitch. And I thought second half, it was almost just like, looked at the bench, like, I've got him, let's throw him on. And Beto and Calvert-Lewin are really tall, they'll win headers. Need to do more than that in the Premier League. Just every side there or thereabouts will lap that up because it's basic and it's not going to get the job done. So I think the onus is on everyone. This is not just about the players and it's not just about mentality, as Dyche keeps on kind of wanting to kind of talk about. It's about kind of the standards across the institution, and it's about kind of the manager and the coaching staff finding solutions to problems that are kind of rearing their head.
Yeah, I think just to go back to the possession that we were talking about, and I suppose the kind of difference between what Everton are good at and what maybe sides want to see from Everton when they come and play us. I was just having a quick look while Paddy was talking, and we had 67% possession on Saturday, which unsurprisingly is the most Everton have had done on the Sean Dyche. It's just a ridiculously high number. But we were talking just a little bit before about how in like the last couple of weeks under Lampard, it almost felt like everyone kind of came in and just said, you can have possession, we'll just, we'll kill you on the break. So just having a quick look then at the 5 of Lampard's last 7 games. So the 2 Bournemouth games, Wolves, Southampton and West Ham, Everton averaged 61% possession. And then in the 7 wins that Everton have had under Sean Dyche since, they've averaged 40%. And then obviously they had 67% on Saturday. So the blueprint's there for what works and what doesn't it? Obviously, it's not as simple as that, because I'm sure there's been quite a few games where they've not had as much possession. The Manchester United away, for instance, or Arsenal away last season, or Arsenal at home a couple of weeks ago. So it's not as black and white as that. But I think it's also quite simple that because of the cohort of players and the manager that we've got, that when Everton become the dominant or more controlling side with the ball, that there's, I really don't think it matters what type of system is brought up at the moment. And I think it doesn't really help that we've gone from 2 very similar games in Brentford and Villa to Luton, probably with one training session probably in between those days. It's not helped, but I still don't think the answers are probably there for those type of matches. And I think what really will come down to is I suppose, hopefully, I suppose the blueprint really is going on to score within the first 30 seconds like they did against Brentford, where they can just, we are at home, but you can have the ball now. I think that's got to be the blueprint.
Yeah. So disappointing. And I just think as well now, like, when we talk about the game at the weekend, like, for me, Paddy, he's just got to make a decision on that midfield now as well. I think James Garner on the right will work maybe in a lot of away games, but I think in home matches, certainly those home matches that Mick mentioned there, where the onus has got to be on us. It's going to be 3 positions, and 4 of them are going to go into it, or 5 if you want to class Danjuma as maybe a player who can play off a centre forward in that Decore role. And it just felt like on Saturday, like, he didn't want to. Not necessarily not upset one of them, but he kind of made the easy choice in there. And for me, looking at Saturday, and I've been very critical of Idrissa Gueye and what he doesn't do for the team mainly. But I just think back to that second half, and when we were trying to sustain pressure and how easy Luton got out, and I think back to that first half against Doncaster, and it was oh my word, what the hell are we watching here? It feels like Everton kind of need him to be on the pitch just to be the grown-up and to sort things out, because, and I know Onana and Garner did well against Villa in midweek, but Jesus Christ, that second half on Saturday, it didn't really look like either of them knew what to do with the ball, what to do without the ball, and certainly for me, I think it's got to be Idrissa Gueye and then 2 others in that midfield. And listen, he's got a tricky decision to make, but I'm not sitting here going, oh, how can you leave Onana out? How can you leave Decore? How can you leave James Garner out? Because I don't think any of them have been absolutely amazing necessarily. I don't think any of them could really complain if they were left out the side, to be honest. But I just think in home games, it needs to be 2 actual wingers and then just make a tricky decision in midfield and go with it.
Yeah, and I don't think there's an easy solution here, really, because in sacrificing any of the 3 starting central midfielders, you lose certain components from Everton's game. I think Onana continues to show an awful lot of promise, despite maybe not always putting it together for 90 minutes. You sometimes see an outstanding 45 from him, but then he seems to kind of fade as the game progresses.
First 20, he was fantastic on Saturday. I remember saying to my dad, like in the ground, like he's playing really well here, and then he just completely disappeared from the game.
I mean, I the same against Sheffield United away for me. I thought he was so dominant in the first 45, but then that seemed to change after the break. Young players like him are going to have those consistency issues, but he seems to be the one that provides the extra kind of defensive quality in there alongside Gay, who is the actual sitting number 6, I suppose, and normally in Dyche's system. And I think if you asked 100 Evertonians who should be dropped, they'd probably say Idrissa Gay, wouldn't they? That'd be the most common answer out of the three. The most common answer, I imagine, would be keep the rest as it is in the central areas, but take out Idrissa Gay and put in James Garner. My issue with that is that I don't think you're substituting like for like. I think in Idrissa Gay, you've got kind of one of the top ball winners in the Premier League still, even at the age of 34. Somebody who kind of keeps Everton ticking in a way that I think maybe we only realise when he's not there, like the Doncaster game, like the second half. And most of Everton's best performances come with him in. The funny thing with Gay is that you'll see his pass completion. It's normally the highest in the team, and a lot of that will be short stuff. But there's always in just about every game, there's one or two instances where he gives the ball away in a really bad position. So he's not giving the ball away loads, but when he does, it tends to be in front of the defence and for a big chance, as it was against Brentford. So do you sacrifice him and put in Garner? Well, I probably think Garner's a number 8 at the moment. He's the one that maybe goes box to box. But every time he's come inside Garner, and every time he's been given that extra onus, that extra creative freedom, I kind of feel as though he hasn't completely grasped it. Doncaster, first half, second half against Luton on Saturday, although there were tactical issues as well with the midfield being bypassed. Doucouré is a really interesting one for me because he's kind of both a strength and a weakness. He's a sign of everything that's good about this Dyche team when it plays well, as they were against Brentford. But you also see the limitations when you're trying to pick the lock against teams at home. And he's not a number 10. I mean, I did an interview with him in Evian in pre-season. He said, I'm not a number 10, and this season I hope and think I'm going to play slightly deeper. Now, that hasn't materialised, but Everton don't have loads of options in that position. So finding the right balance in there is going to be interesting. I think the most likely solution here involves Dwight McNeil and Jack Harrison as the wingers, and then 3 out of 4 from Idrissa Gay, Doucouré, Onana, and James Garner. And you can make a case for any of them, really, in there. At times, you're going to probably need more kind of defensive solidity in there, so you're going to have to play Gay and Onana. At other times, you might only need to play one of those, or you might be able to drop, I don't know, Doucouré and play Danjuma in the hole. What I would say is that I think at the moment that they're still searching for that right blend and that right balance, and it's not completely right. But with Doucouré in the home games, it strikes me as though they're not able to sustain wave after wave of attack. He's better suited to doing what he did against Brentford, which is just running beyond the main striker and providing that extra pair of legs in there. So it's going to be a difficult one. It's going to be a really difficult one. The only one I don't really see a place for, and I would like to see a place for him, but is Danjuma. Like, where does Danjuma fit into all of this? Because you probably look and go, McNeil and Harrison look like Dyche wingers in a typical sense. They do a lot of what Dyche wants a winger to do. Idrissa Gay, Onana, Doucouré provide the kind of the legs. Dyche clearly loves James Garner. Where does Arnaud Danjuma fit into all of this? Because it doesn't feel like a logical place within the setup for him right now.
Well, it feels like he's just stepped into the exact same position that Damari Gray was in, doesn't it? Like,
yeah.
you're only gonna start matches and if somebody else is injured, because I don't quite trust you. And like it's mad saying about a player who's really just starting October. He's not played many games for us, but it feels already like he's in that position because like
Do you not think Everton would have been far likely to get something from that game in the second half if Danjuma, for example, was playing off a central striker rather than in the second half either Decore in there or that DCL better experiment where it was just Route 1 football all the time? Like,
I mean, those two were horrendous together, weren't they? Like, it didn't look like they'd done any work in training whatsoever, like playing together. Like, they were both challenging for the same ball. They were running to the same. It was like just so bad, like and chaotic. But like, I think you're right. Like Danjuma was when he was really good at Villarreal, played off I think it was Gerard Moreno, wasn't it? Like a big centre forward, sort of in like a strike partnership. So
do you remember when Ancelotti used to call Richarlison a centre left forward? It was almost like there's no real terminology beyond that in the game that exists already for him. He's kind of not a winger, Richarlison, but he's also not your kind of your lone striker in a 4-3-3, for example. He's kind of a bit of everything. He's like a hybrid forward. And I get that sense from Danjuma, but he's not a wide midfielder for Dyche. And I think that's what McNeil and Harrison are. They're wide midfielders rather than wingers. He's not the lone striker for Dyche because he's not going to have the physicality. So he kind of, sometimes he'll play off the left, but actually maybe that role alongside a centre forward is the best one for him in this Dyche setup. And that kind of centre left forward thing, that's where he did a lot of his best work at Villarreal. And maybe that's where he needs to play. But there's no evidence yet of Dyche moving away from Decore and the system as it is. So he's the one I wonder about moving forward, Danjuma, because I see there'll be injuries and there'll be changes and ebbs and flows throughout the season. But he's the one I just kind of like, where is he going to fit in under Dyche right now? It doesn't seem particularly obvious to me.
Yeah, especially, and you could probably say of all the forwards you've got, probably the like most gifted technically, you'd say, in terms of dribbling, shooting as well. So
goal threat, and like you look at the starting 11 on Saturday in really simplistic terms. But the question I was posing to people was, how many would you back to get beyond 5 goals in a league season, and then do it again for how many would get beyond 10? And you could say Calvert-Lewin, if he stays fit for a full season, will get you 10 or more. Dwight McNeil in an average season probably gets you around 5. Decore in an average season probably gets you around 5. Nobody else is getting beyond that. So when we talk about Everton creating chances, having a high XG, that's all well and good.
Yeah.
But you need the lads there that are going to finish even at that kind of average, moderate level.
Well, is that like something like XG takes into account? Like, say if like Haaland had the header that James Garner had at the weekend, would it change based on that? So but by and large, if you've got like if you take that into account, then if you've got a lot more players on the pitch that aren't goal scorers, then that's sort of, does that skew it a little bit in that sense? Like it's not an expected goal necessarily if you've got more players who aren't prolific, I suppose. But
yeah,
just go on. Sorry,
it's an interesting point, but last season Everton, I think, were the second highest underperformers in terms of expected goals to actual goals, which suggests that their finishing was far less than the average. It was far less than the average quality. This season, after Chelsea's win at Fulham on Monday, they are now the highest underperformers against expected goals. So Everton are not performing to expectation there and haven't done for quite a while, which to me suggests that they haven't had, and maybe still at this moment, they don't have the right players. I mean, you look at the big chances, and I know the Idrissa Gueye one is actually fairly low in expected goals terms. I think actually in my head it's a bigger chance than expected goals terms. The one player you don't want that chance to fall to is him. Like me or you, we're more likely to put that away than Idrissa Gueye.
It wound me up so much, that chance. Like, just because I was right behind it where I sit, and like he had like to his right, it's the entire goal and no defenders.
I'd rather he hadn't shot, and I know it's a goal and opportunity, but I'd rather he just passed somebody and just passed the ball. But so that comes into it, and then there's an opportunity for James Garner, which is actually a high value chance from McNeil's clipped cross. And again, you're not expecting actually James Garner to score there. Whereas if it's Calvert-Lewin, it's almost certainly going in. So this is a problem. Everton don't have kind of average level finishing at the moment. And the only way that changes is if you get more of those guys onto the pitch. Who's going to take those chances when they present themselves? Calvert-Lewin, maybe Danjuma. I think Danjuma is one of the biggest goal threats in this squad. How can they get him involved more? Jack Harrison probably gets you. He's not. I don't think he's a supreme finisher, but I think he get you over the course of a normal season. He'll get you, the evidence suggests he'll get you 6-7 goals. Everton need to find more of those. That's the only way this changes. This pattern changes.
I think there's a lot to be said then for Saturday to maybe go with. Cause I'm probably with you. I probably wouldn't drop Idrissa Gueye, but I think you are left in a difficult situation where, ultimately maybe what he adds can be in certain games replaced by other players and who can maybe add more. But I do think we missed them on Saturday in the second half. I thought, especially, I think in the first half, especially in that first 15, 20 minutes, and then pretty much again in the last 15, 20 minutes, or last 10, 15 minutes, we were just really good at just maintaining the pressure. And that's what you kind of don't see from those type of players. But, just being in the right position at the right time is a skill at the same, if you know what I mean. But I kind of feel that maybe could that be replicated by Decore? Could you? I don't think he's good on the ball as Idrissa Gueye, but could you maybe play him deeper on Saturday if you're going to have a little bit more dominance, a little bit more control, maybe a little bit more time in our attacking areas, and then have him as someone who arrives late in the box? Because I know Onana's played that role at times as someone, because the sheer physique of him, I suppose, really. And I know people have had complaints about that, but I suppose compared to Idrissa Gueye, out of those two midfielders, he is going to play that position. But I think Decore could play that, and then that then opens to have him. Because I think you're absolutely right. Ultimately, you can't really. Sometimes you just got to simplify it, where having players who produce an element of threat on their own, you need as many of those players as possible on the pitch. And I think you're spot on, really, in that you do look at that team, while individually they're quite good at certain things, or lacking in other areas, there's just not enough goal scorers, and that is obviously not going to help. Where if you're creating good opportunities and not scoring them, that's your reason why. And that kind of my worry when it comes to the fact that, is this team just going to stay unlucky forever, or is it a case of these chances are, first of all, not completely organic, I suppose, but are these just always going to fall to the wrong player? And the only way you can rectify that is by playing attacking players as much as possible. And I suppose after Bournemouth, I don't think there's a lot of opportunities really in the future, in the short term anyway, to maybe try Danjuma off Calvert-Lewin or try Decore in a deeper role, because I think Liverpool, West Ham and Brighton will be more so what we've seen against Brentford, or will we hope. I think that's what the game plan will be. So I think maybe Saturday's the opportunity to go more of a 4-2-3-1 and go Harrison, McNeil, and then Danjuma behind Calvert-Lewin. Because I think we said multiple times on the transfer show during the summer, Matt, that I just don't see Danjuma as a Dyche player. He's not someone who, and I don't think, I've seen speculation that I wonder if Danjuma's done something in training, or do they not get on? But I just don't think he, and I think rightfully so from what Dyche wants, Danjuma is not going to be a player who tracks back 100% of the time for a full 90 minutes. I just don't think that's his game. And you can't I just don't think you can change that for a 25, 26-year-old.
You don't want him to be either, do you? You want him to be the explosive player around the box.
No, but I think it's clear that's what Dyche wants from his wingers. That's why Harrison, and like you said before, Harrison and McNeil is, mid wingers or wide midfielders to a team, because that's what they'll do, and they've got the engine to do that. Which to me only says that if Danjuma is going to play consistently, it's got to be off the striker, because he's not the striker. And then go back to my original point, I suppose, there's not going to be many opportunities to do that in the short term. So I think you've kind of got to try and test it on Saturday. And I think it would be interesting to see that with Decore and Onana, whether it might be too much of a risk to not play Idrissa Gueye after what happened on Saturday. But I think it's something I'd like to see. But it might, it might not work, but it's not like the results are free flowing in at the moment anyway. So
yeah,
it's absolutely fine. By the way, to have different blueprints for different games. I think one of the issues.
Yeah.
I think one of the issues here, maybe with the approach from Brentford to Villa to, well, let's actually take Villa out, from Brentford to the next league game against Luton, was that you probably got a fairly similar approach, with wingers inverting and looking to get beyond the main striker. The need for something else is quite clear, and I don't think it involves Vitaly Mikalenko getting to the byline and whipping crosses in. I just don't think that's the way Everton are likely to get any joy. Certainly not Mikalenko's game. So it's absolutely fine to have that blueprint we've spoken about, which is Doucouré going beyond Calvert-Lewin and McNeil playing as a more conventional winger away from home or in games where you can have less possession. That seems to be Everton's best route of success at the moment. Where they're coming up short time and time again is when there's the extra onus on them, when they've got more possession, when they've got to create things. I mean, let's not forget the most creative player from open play by far in that Everton squad last season was Iwobi, and he's left. So we've further entrenched this transition towards direct wing play, getting crosses into the area. There may also be times, by the way, where sides that aren't as physical as Luton aren't able to cope with Calvert-Lewin and Beto in the penalty area. But you've got to pick your battles. You've got to make sure that the game plan is tailored to the opposition, and instead of a one-size-fits-all approach, and a one-size-fits-all approach which kind of suggests that you're going to get success against Brentford away in the same way you're going to get against Luton at home. So let's see what that is. I think there needs to be a bit more adaptability and needs to be a bit more of a thought into how Everton can break some of these sides down. And maybe that involves Danjuma, maybe it involves a reconfiguration of the midfield. It almost certainly would involve different personnel at fullback if you want to create from there. So all of these things, a lot of these things we're putting on the manager. These are solutions for him to find. I don't think it's as simple as to say the players are making all the errors, they're not taking the chances, and we need to improve the mentality and change the narrative around Everton. Some of that might be true, but there's also work for Dyche to do here as well.
Yeah, steered clear of the manager because I feel like we might be speaking about him a lot over the break. So we'll get to that when we come to it. But do you know, I sort of like moved on from the Luton game, and then last night I saw the goal Burnley scored against them, and I was like, oh my god.
I've not seen it, and I'm trying to watch as little football as possible.
It was essentially goalkeeper passed the centre back passed the centre midfielder passed the striker right through the middle of the pitch, and they score. Like 3 passes through the middle. Awful.
No, long balls and 6'7" strikers is the way to go.
Sorry, Mick, what are you going to say?
Luton pressed them so high though to give them the opportunity for that. And whereas, on Saturday we just thought, well, we'll just, ignore all that and just hoof it up as quickly as possible. And like Paddy's alluded to quite often already, that, Luton would have been made up with that, wouldn't he? So
yeah, just did me head in. Like even on Saturday, I sat there on the ground. I was like, there is so much space here for us to exploit, but we just can't. We're just so Let's not revisit it. We'll leave it there anyway. We've gone on for ages there about so our trip down memory lane at the start, I think, which took up the hour there. But cheers to Mick, cheers to Paddy. Do comment, do rate, give us a rating, all those sorts of things. We'll be back later in the week on Blue Room Extra. Dave's doing Subscribers Weekly. We'll have weekend preview. We'll have mailbag, and then we'll be back in the Denby Castle after Bournemouth at home. Send shivers down your spine, doesn't it? Thinking back to that last day of last season. But fingers crossed, it's the same result, and we go into the international break happy. But cheers for tuning in. Up the toffees. We'll catch you soon.